Welcome back, true believers and all you spectacular Spidey fans, to another very exciting episode of Marvel's Spider-Man 2 101. And while I'm sure the majority of you have already 100% completed the game for yourselves, that doesn't mean that there isn't still quite a lot to talk about for Marvel's Spider-Man 2, as well as the future of Insomniac's Spider-Man franchise overall. And this is merely going to be one of many other 101 videos that we'll be releasing in the near future, where for this particular video, we are going to be fully breaking down exactly what type of future content we can expect to be added within Marvel's Spider-Man 2, which has not only been already heavily teased by the creative director of the game himself of Brian Intihar, but we also have some pretty major teases within the game that also hint at a plethora of other characters that we could see appear within this inevitable DLC as well. So if you're someone like me who's beyond excited to receive even more Marvel's Spider-Man 2 content in the future, then definitely be sure to flip that like button and subscribe to the channel for any more massive Marvel Spider-Man 2 videos down the line. Now, even though this should be pretty obvious at this point, but within this entire video, we are going to be heading into full-on spoiler territory. So if you're someone who hasn't been able to fully play through Marvel Spider-Man 2 for yourself, then definitely make sure that you go and finish the game and come back when you're done. But as you could have already seen from this video's title and thumbnail, is that the most likely candidate who is probably going to be the main focus of this inevitable Marvel Spider-Man 2 DLC is who I believe to be one of the biggest surprises within Marvel Spider-Man 2, and is easily the biggest star out of all the other side missions that appear within the game. And of course, I'm primarily talking about all the side missions that do feature Peter Parker as Spider-Man and Yuri Watanabe as the Wraith, who are completely going after this cult leader known as the Flame. Whereas it ends up being revealed at the end of those side missions, the Flame turns out to be none other than Cletus Cassidy, who we obviously all know as the one and only Carnage.
I hoped we'd run into you again.
You know me? Cassidy!
Think of the damage we can do now, man!
Where at the end of the Flame storyline, Cletus and all of his followers of the Flame ended up derailing an Oscorp train that actually had a symbiote sample on board. And now, given that Cletus has his hands on a symbiote, it's only a matter of time until he ends up turning into Carnage and simply wreaks utter chaos throughout New York City.
I'll let you know when I find him.
Flame wanted that train derailed, so he could get a symbiote. At least we stopped him from taking innocent lives in the process.
Are you sure about that?
Now, I know what you all might be thinking. Carnage as a villain is such a massive member of Spider-Man's rogues gallery, is that surely Insomniac might want to save Carnage as a main antagonist for the inevitable third game by the time that releases. But in actuality, I personally think that Insomniac is going to do the complete opposite. Whereas we see in the ending and the first post-credit scene of Marvel's Spider-Man 2, is that we are undoubtedly going to see the origin of Norman Osborn fully becoming the Green Goblin in Marvel's Spider-Man 3, who is more than likely going to be the main villain of that game, as well as the potential return of Dr. Otto Octavius coming back as Dr. Octopus, especially considering how heavily both Norman and Otto have been incorporated within the main campaign of the first Marvel Spider-Man game, as well as the continuation of Norman's character development in Marvel's Spider-Man 2, where in comparison to what we saw with Cletus Cassidy, is that his entire narrative within Marvel's Spider-Man 2 was completely locked behind the Flame side missions. So even though Carnage himself is an absolutely huge character to tease, it does make sense that Insomniac may want to continue the Carnage plotline in a completely different set of a DLC narrative. That way, instead of having the symbiote threat continue on into Marvel's Spider-Man 3, all of the leftover symbiote story beats will be completely wrapped up within Marvel's Spider-Man 2. That way, both Green Goblin and Doc Ock would end up being the central focus of Marvel's Spider-Man 3 without any other distractions attractions from the previous games. But the craziest thing about this potential Carnage DLC is that I personally don't think it's going to be in a similar vein to what we already saw with the other DLC from Spider-Man PS4 with the City That Never Sleeps, where for the case of that game, we did end up receiving 3 separate DLC packs, which did come with their own individual story chapters, as well as brand new missions and alternate suits that you could wear. And yes, even though I do think we could see a similar structure of DLC happen here for Marvel's Spider-Man 2, I genuinely think that Insomniac may want to go bigger this time around with the DLC, and instead of releasing individual story chapters, I do believe it is very possible that we could end up seeing a complete DLC expansion of Marvel's Spider-Man 2, with an entire mini-campaign focusing around Carnage, as well as the inclusion of brand new Marvel heroes entering the fray, and last but not least is an expansion of the open world New York, which may end up feeling a bit similar to another massive PlayStation Studios game that we did receive previously, with none other than Horizon Forbidden West and its massive DLC expansion with Burning Shores. But what's even crazier is that we might have already received official confirmation about this DLC happening from both Brian Intihar and even the main actor of Venom himself, of Tony Todd. Where if you actually look at Tony Todd's Twitter page, you will find a very interesting post that he left on Halloween, where he went online to share a link to the Eminem Venom movie music video. But under that link is where things get really interesting. Whereas Tony Todd states, hashtag Tom Hardy, hashtag mad love for all my venomous peeps, hashtag Yuri, hashtag Najee, see ya soon. At Insomniac Games, hashtag happy Halloween. Now, if you managed to watch one of my previous 101 videos, is that it was already fully confirmed by the narrative director at Insomniac Games himself, of John Paquette, is that they would be fully willing to make a completely standalone spin-off AAA Venom game, which would most likely be in the similar scope to what we saw with Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, only if the fans themselves are wanting that to happen. And yeah, despite what Insomniac had to say about waiting to hear about the fans' receptions for Marvel's Spider-Man 2, simply based on the fact that Insomniac made Venom playable in Marvel's Spider-Man 2, it undoubtedly tells me that a standalone Venom game would be an easy next step for them, especially given that very cryptic see ya soon statement from Tony Todd himself, and that he went on to tag Yuri Lowenthal, Najee Jeter, and Insomniac Games, straight up tells me that Tony Todd is not yet done fully playing Venom in Insomniac's universe. But whether or not that means that we could see Tony Todd return as Venom in a completely standalone Venom spin-off game, or a massive Carnage DLC expansion, is still yet to be determined. But given how much Tony Todd loves the character of Venom, simply being able to return to play as that character would be a dream come true for everyone involved. Where shockingly enough, it was actually already teased by Tony Todd that Venom may end up returning after Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is over just a few months ago. Where this news comes straight from the mouth of one of my good online buddies of the Deeper Depths, who you might have heard me discuss about in some of my previous one-on-one videos, as well as being able to talk to him one-on-one within his own channel. So definitely make sure to check those videos out if you haven't already, but the biggest takeaway that you should look at from the Deeper Depths is that he was able to have direct one-on-one conversations with both Tony Todd and Najee Jeter, where based on both Tony and Najee's statements, it does sound like that after Marvel's Spider-Man 2 releases this year in 2023, we are going to end up receiving even more content related to Venom sometime next year in 2024, and that both Tony, Najee, and even Yuri Lowenthal himself are going to be involved within this project.
So we all know that Spider-Man 2 is going to come out 2023.
Yes.
And this other project, I'm not saying it's a game or not, but that probably won't have a hit date of 2024.
Then I hooked up with your boy Najee Jeter at one of the Comic Cons in Shreveport, Louisiana, and he verbally told me that him, Yuri, and Tony Todd was going to be working on a project together in 2024. I brought us news with Tony Todd when it was dry, when Insomniac Games was saying nothing. We literally set the internet world on fire. Shout out to my guy Evan Filarca, because he helped to make that happen.
And if that doesn't already tease that even more Marvel Spider-Man 2 content is coming down the line, then I don't know what will. But for those of you who have already fully beaten the main campaign for Marvel Spider-Man 2, you might be wondering is that how in the world could Venom return in Marvel Spider-Man 2 based on the symbiote pretty much disintegrating at the very end of the game? Well, if you pay close enough attention like me towards all the phone calls within Marvel Spider-Man 2, there is one specific conversation that takes place between Peter and Dr. Connors where they do go on to discuss the lingering effects that the symbiote may have within a person's body, and that even though Peter managed to separate himself from the Venom symbiote, there is still a fragment left within him.
I've been looking through years of research notes. The symbiote channels a collective consciousness.
That hive mind I was in.
Is optimistic. It may still be inside you.
What?
Nothing to panic about, but perhaps you should come to the lab for some tests.
Can't, Doc. Bigger problems. Gotta go.
And as we clearly saw later on within the story, this is how the player was able to keep the Venom powers within the game by making Peter acquire the anti-Venom symbiote, which is not only great from a gameplay perspective, but it also shows from a narrative perspective that even though Peter may have managed to defeat Venom at the end of the game, there may still be a bit of lingering symbiote particles within Harry's bloodstream, which would not only be a fantastic way to have Venom return within the Marvel Spider-Man franchise, but would also have the absolutely insane potential to end up seeing Peter Parker, Miles Morales, and even Harry Osborn as either Venom or Anti-Venom completely team up together in order to defeat Carnage.
A perfect world order. Those who cannot share my vision will be crushed by it.
Speaking of crushed, it's showtime, freaks. Ooh, I smell bad symbiote, and it ain't me.
Bring it on, Grandpa!
And if that doesn't sound like a must-play DLC mission for all of you, then I don't know what could. Or, as it turns out, there might be even more crazy features that could be incorporated within this game's potential DLC, where alongside of having Peter, Miles, Wraith, and even the potential return of Venom coming back to take on Carnage, it also seems heavily implied by Brian Intar himself that we may just end up seeing the Man Without Fear be added into Marvel's Spider-Man 2, which of course is none other than the one and only Daredevil.
Speaking on maps as well, we noticed like some differences between like the map changing a bit between games. One of our gameplay editors noticed Nelson and Murdoch's sign is gone. Is that intentional or is that just oops?
Are they okay?
Yeah. Did they break?
Maybe did they upgrade? We just haven't found their bigger building.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, a lot of us. I worked remotely almost the whole project, so yeah. That's a good question. Stay tuned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good
find though.
In addition to that, I noticed a lot of.
Now, despite that very sly tease coming from Brian himself, we also see quite a few Easter eggs that have been layered within the base game that do seem to directly tease towards Daredevil's existence. Where alongside of receiving a flat-out Matt Murdock tease at the very end of the Sandman side mission,
I wish there was more I could do. Maybe I can ask some lawyer friends to help Marco with visitation rights.
I'm a really good lawyer.
we also have seen a very interesting building interior within Marvel's New York, where if you do manage to swing to this one particular area within the main island of Manhattan, you will find what appears to be a bookstore which you can actually enter. And despite this bookstore being one of the few areas that you can actually enter within the entirety of Marvel's New York, you will also see this very interesting looking red symbol, which may or may not be a direct tease to an enemy faction within the Marvel Universe known as the Hand, which, in case you don't know, is a pretty common threat that Daredevil goes up against. And what's more is that Insomniac have already included a gameplay mechanic that you can utilize in Marvel Spider-Man 2, where you are able to team up with another hero during combat, where, for example, during a certain point of the game's story, you could be playing as Peter, come across a crime in the open world, and then take out enemies during that crime with a partner by your side like that of Miles Morales, Wraith, or even Harry when he's doing his his best Agent Venom impression. So if we're going to be able to pull off that exact same team-up mechanic during combat with another Marvel hero like Daredevil, I can't even begin to put into words just how hype that could potentially be. So if even one of these things ends up happening within this potential Marvel Spider-Man 2 DLC, it truly just goes to show just how dedicated Insomniac are to try and provide fans with the most definitive Spider-Man experience possible. And as for when exactly we could see any of this content be revealed for Marvel Spider-Man 2, we are just going to have to stay tuned in the meantime. But until that inevitable DLC announcement comes, that's the video I have for all you today, and please let me know all your thoughts in the comments section down below. What do you think about Marvel Spider-Man 2 potentially receiving a massive DLC expansion with characters like Peter, Miles, Wraith, Daredevil, Venom, and Carnage being at the forefront? And knowing how big of a character Venom was within Marvel's Spider-Man 2, would you only like to see him return in this potential DLC, or would you also like to see him receive his own standalone spin-off game like what we saw with Miles Morales? Let me know what you think, be sure to leave a like on the video, and subscribe to the channel if you did enjoy, and for more Marvel Spider-Man 2 videos like this in the future. Thank you all so much for watching, stay spectacular Spidey fans, and until next time, peace out.